Welcome to Behind the Cusp, a podcast diving deep into the layers of self-growth, inner work, and transformation. I'm your host, Marissa Mead, and after 15 years as a digital creator, I'm sharing my raw, unfiltered journey of healing and self-discovery to walk alongside you in yours. Together, we'll dive deep into the conversations that matter most, uncovering what it means to truly evolve from the inside out. This is where you elevate into transformation. So take a breath, settle in, and let's begin. Holy cow, you guys, it is freezing in Florida. I am back in Florida, and I literally said to my boyfriend the other day, did I not move far enough south? It is in the 30s here this week at night. Like, it's a low of 30s, which is basically unheard of in Naples. And so I am freezing my little tush off. And yes, I came from 0 degrees in Connecticut, but it's just weird when it's in the 30s and there's palm trees outside. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's more normal if there's snow and you're bundled up in a coat and stuff. But here I'm like, I feel like a fish out of water. What is happening? Anyway, yes, it totally could be much worse, but it's just so funny that we have this weather here. So I'm back in Florida, kind of in that transition period of getting myself calibrated and settled, if you will, to being back here full time. I'm very excited for that and just feeling like my life is a little bit more settled because the back and forth is a lot and takes its toll, as I've shared with you guys. But I want to dive right into this week's episode because I actually have a short time window today to record, so we're just going to crank this one right out. So last episode, first of all, had such a good response from you guys. I feel like it resonated so well, mostly because it's not the narrative that you typically hear around the new year. We talked about how January is for rest, not reinvention, not new year, new me, all of that. It's about resting, going inward, stillness, resetting, recalibrating our nervous system, etc. And that really resonated with a lot of you. And I love that so much for you guys. I actually am going to be launching guest episodes this month. We're going to start that lineup of guests that I've been recording with. I'm so excited for that. And I was going to launch the first guest episode this week. However, I was kind of like thinking about riding on the energy of that January episode. And because we're here in the first week of February now, talking about what February is about. So we just had this rest and stillness of January and carrying that into February. And where are we at now in February? So instead of like leaving you guys hanging with, okay, well, I just did this for all of January, what are we doing in February type thing, I wanted to hone in on the energy of February and what the energy of February is and how you can embody that right now. So January is or was for rest, and February is about re-emerging or re-entering, if you will. If January didn't go as you, quote, planned, then pull up a seat. This episode is for you because January is not for execution, it's for rest. And I know for a fact so many of us felt like January was the never-ending month, the longest month ever. It was a heavy month. It was a month of sickness for literally, I feel like everyone I know except for myself got sick in January and like down bad sick. Snow, crazy weather all over the country, not just up in New England, etc. And I'm reminded that every single year, it seems like everyone is so excited, ready to go for January, fresh start, new me, all these types of things, this new mindset, whatever. And January, at the end of January, the entire world is like, January was the longest month ever. January was an absolute cluster of chaos. January was the worst month. Like it's like this drastic difference between the beginning of the month and the end of the month. And this is interesting to observe because it's not just like on a personal level that we feel this. I feel this is like as the collective as a whole always feels this. And it's like, why don't we learn? Well, ladies or gentlemen, we are learning. We are doing things differently. We just honored that month of rest that we need to really reset ourselves. And this is where we can recognize that January isn't for the plowing ahead and pushing ahead and all of that. It's our permission button to rest and reset, to go inward, to get into the stillness. So if you missed that episode last week about January, I really, really encourage you to give it a listen. Even though we are in the month of February now, it's not too late. It's not too late to even hear those things. And you can even do some of that honoring and resting in the month of February still. It's not like you missed the boat per se, but you can even have that knowledge as we approach even in a year from now, the same time of year. And it's going to completely shift your mindset and change your life. And I say that not lightly because it actually will. So here we are in the month of February, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. February feels like this quiet invitation to begin moving again. If January was for rest, February is the slow emergence, the re-entering, almost like the picture that I had when I was preparing my notes for this episode earlier today was a butterfly when it's in the cocoon, when the caterpillar goes in the cocoon. It's in the cocoon, things are happening. And then before it fully emerges as a butterfly, there's this slow movement. There's this slow returning to the movement. Like there's no other word for it. The movement begins again. And then it starts breaking out of the shell to fully emerge as a butterfly. We are not quite at the butterfly phase yet. That's going to happen in March. And yes, I will have an episode there in March about this. But February is where that movement begins again. Another picture that I had when I was thinking through this is like, what is such a good depiction of this beginning again movement? And if you've ever taken a yoga class, towards the end of the class, you'll usually be laying flat on your mat and still for maybe the last 5 minutes or something of class. And you really enter this still meditative state, like that cocoon hibernation state, if you will. And then the instructor will be like, okay, begin to move your fingers, begin to move your toes, bring yourself back into the space, come alive again, if you will. That's where we're at. That's where we're at in February. And that's where we are going to shift our focus now during this episode. So this episode about February is going to help you set the tone for the emergence that comes in March. February is your soft, grounded guide into the next season. So January was the stillness. February is the guide for the March resurgence into the full beauty of that blooming butterfly, if you will. So let's talk about the energy of February. It holds an entirely different frequency than January, and most of you are probably sitting there like, thank gosh. I was sick, my family was sick, my husband was sick, like whatever. I know January just had everyone down bad, like I said before, but the fog kind of lifts. Maybe that's the literal brain fog, or that like just absolute zapped nervous system feeling that you had, the recovery that you needed to be in. Light is returning quite literally, like our time is shifting. We're starting to see the light last a little bit longer now. It's not getting dark at like 3:30, 4 o'clock. You're not flicking the lights on. You're getting a little bit more light. And so does your desire to move. You've had that couple weeks of rest and restoration, and now you're like, okay, I feel like I'm ready to get going again. You're not hitting the gas full blast per se, but there's this urgency or a desire to start moving again. February is where the movement starts flowing, and it's laying the foundations of the clarity that January brought. So in that stillness, in that reflection, in that restoration that was happening in January, hopefully there was some clarity that you got in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it was about yourself. Maybe it was about your relationship, your job, your business, your personal health or fitness, or just different direction that you have. Like maybe it's your values, the things that you are aligning with, the foundations, the clarity that came in January is now going to have a foundation to it in February. The foundation will be laid to make sure that you are headed where you want to go. We're putting ourselves, like the movement is happening and it's recalibrating us in the direction that we need to be headed. We aren't running forward ahead, but we're kind of adjusting the direction. We're adjusting the compass, if you will. And so February reminds us that we're not rushing, we're not forcing. We are re-entering. We are tapping into the direction that we're headed in, the right movement, the right flow. Your vision, your life, your self-trust, your self-worth, your even self-love, like February is the month of love. All of these things are beginning to take shape this month. And you know what? I want to mention that you may calibrate and kind of settle into one place and then realize, okay, wait, you know what? Another little bit of an adjustment needs to be made, or another little bit of a tweak, or another little bit of movement needs to be made in one direction or another. And that's okay, because February is all about the direction, the alignment, the recalibration, so that you can then spring forward when that springtime comes. As you are re-entering with the clarity that came in January, choosing what aligns with you and then also gently adjusting what doesn't is key. And this is exactly where the tiny little adjustments, what I just mentioned, comes into play, because you want to step into the movement that's going to happen with clear knowing, clear intention, clear movement forward. We are not moving forward until we're clear. And so for some of us, that might take a few days. For some of us, that might be a few weeks to really settle into that. Again, we have the whole month of February for this to happen. But we are moving forward with 3 things. And as I say this so emphatically, ladies, like we are moving forward with 3 things this year. We are moving with direction, alignment, and recalibration. Those are the 3 themes that I've kind of already been saying for these last couple of minutes, but I want to dive into them a little bit more, because when we move forward, we're not moving forward anymore with fuzziness or disorientation or non-clarity, not the fogginess or whatever. We're not doing that anymore, because we've taken the time to rest. We've taken the time to get still and clear on our intention, and now we're moving forward. 1, with direction. Direction is the clear path, a roadmap, if you will. When you move with direction, you know exactly where you're going. Like literally think of it as your Apple Maps or Google Maps or whatever. It tells you turn at the light, turn here, yield here, or whatever. We're not aimlessly moving towards our destination. We are moving clearly toward that. That is what direction is. The second thing is alignment. When you move forward, you want to move in alignment. And I was thinking about this because I use this word a lot, because it is something that has become so innately ingrained into the choices that I make. I move forward in choices with alignment towards what feels right. And this really shifted in my life when I left my engagement. And if you didn't listen to that episode, you can go back. That was the first episode that we did. Because that one choice of moving in alignment shifted how I made every other choice in my life, because I realized that alignment is so key. You can make choices and you can move forward, but if you're not aligned, then it doesn't matter what your choice is. It's not going to feel right. And so I use the word alignment a lot, but realize I never really defined it, because maybe some of you are like, okay, I'm moving forward, I feel like I'm aligned, but like, what does alignment actually mean? And alignment at the most basic level means that your choices are matching your values. If you feel misaligned, go back to what you value. And once you've identified what you value, you can adjust your movements to be aligned with them. When you do that, you will feel peace. You will feel settled. You will feel calibrated in the right direction. And that brings me to the last thing is the movement that we are making in February requires recalibration. And this means that the reflecting that we did in January, and from the reflecting, we gained wisdom, right? Like we are gaining wisdom from the reflection that we are doing. And when we gain this wisdom, it gives us insight to recalibrate, to readjust the direction, to readjust where we are headed. And this gives us permission to shift. I think sometimes we feel, or at least I should say I feel, that if I make a change or an adjustment, it can feel scary, right? Like when you change something that you're so used to doing, it can feel scary, or you might even think about like, what are other people going to think? What are they going to say? Like, first of all, we're not making choices for other people, but also we're worried about like the judgment that comes with that. You know, did I make the wrong choice before? And it's not about right and wrong. It's about realigning and readjusting. Maybe in December, that was the right direction for you. But when the reflection happened in January, there's an adjustment that needs to be made now to recalibrate for the new direction that you are headed. You follow? And so you're allowed to shift. You're allowed to change direction. You're allowed to make little tweaks. You're allowed to make big tweaks, big jumps, big changes. We can course correct. We can change the direction or alter the direction entirely. And this is where we recalibrate and we recenter and we recenter to then begin again. The change happens in these little moments. This is where the change happens. These little moments of recalibration, of readjustment. I feel like I, again, have this picture in my head of you put on a top and maybe there's a ton of like lace ups or buttons or whatever, and you're kind of like readjusting them to fit you and your body and like just right. It has to feel just right, you know? And that's really what recalibration is. There's little tiny tweaks and adjustments in that compass of where you're headed. And that's ultimately where the change happens. It can be the tiniest little thing that truly alters your course entirely. January held the deep inner work for us. The questioning, the clearing, the quiet, the stillness. And maybe you went through all of those processes multiple times or in different ways. You'd approach your business, you'd approach your relationship, you'd approach your relationship with yourself, you'd approach your family, you'd approach whatever it was. Maybe there was a lot of that happening in January. I know for me, there absolutely was. And now February brings the opportunity for the choice. The choice is now ours to implement what we have learned or grown in, or what we want to step forward in, to trust what's surfaced, what's come up in the stillness. We talked about that in the last episode. What's going to come up in the stillness? What are we going to feel when we're not busy and moving forward and, all over the place? What is surfacing for us? And in February, we're moving forward into the integration. We've done the reflecting, and now it's time to respond, to lay the foundation of what we want to move into next. And February is so key for this because we're laying the foundation. It's like the springboard for the entire year ahead. January is like the closing of all of that, and February is then the opening and the foundation for the springboard ahead. So February might be the shortest month on our calendar, literally from a literal standpoint, but it's the most important because it's laying the foundation for us ahead. So when we talk about foundation too, we probably are thinking about it being the bottom layer, right? Like the foundation sounds like the bottom layer. And I think it's important to remember here that we are not starting from scratch. You're never starting from scratch. I almost hate the term like new year, new me, out with the old and with the new, like all of that mentality, all of that buzz, because we aren't new necessarily. We're never starting over. But that's a beautiful thing, that we're not starting over. We're not starting from scratch. Can we reframe that thinking to be, we are starting from a place of wisdom, the wisdom that we've gained and gleaned from the things in the past, how we want to make different choices, how we want to align things differently. We are learning what we want and don't want at the same time, who we want to be, who we don't want to be. We're not reinventing, we are just evolving. And that's why the title of January's episode is so key. January is for rest, not reinvention. We're not reinventing anything. We are resting, we are pulling back to allow for what's next to come through. And then in February, we recalibrate to what that is. It's actually so liberating when you think about this, because there's not this energy of having to start over or feel like you have to empty everything out to then refill back up. Do you know what I mean? We are deepening who we are in the process of our own becoming. We aren't behind. There's no time that's wasted. And even if, the month of January wasn't wasted, it's a slower start. It's a return to us. It's the inner winter, the quiet month. And that's all part of the becoming that then emerges in February. In episode, I think 2 or 3, we really dove into what becoming is. I think it's called The Art of Becoming. And the month of January on its own contributes to that whole process of becoming so deeply. It helps set the tone for us, and it helps lay the foundation that we are now in February. So if you also didn't listen to the episode of Becoming, which I'm sure many of you did, it's, I think, the second most listened to episode behind my engagement one. You guys really, really liked that one, and it still is like the most downloaded up to now. That episode is really, really good. And even if you already listened to it, go back to it as a refresher right now, because you are in the process of becoming right now. Like your whole life is a becoming, but in that there's all these different little phases of becoming within it. And sometimes it's good to have those little reminders of what that phase looks like. So you're not starting over. You are starting wiser, more grounded in who you are, more connected to what actually matters, and more aligned with where you want to go. Let that be your power this month. Let that be your gas this month, if you will. Like when you press on the gas, let that be what is fueling you. The knowing that you're more grounded, you are more aligned, you are more connected. And remembering that you don't need to do this to prove anything to anyone else, but instead you are doing it because you are putting into practice the trust that you have built within yourself. But the process of rest allows us to really tap in to knowing ourselves on a deeper level. And I think that's why it's something that I have done and returned to so many times because I realize how many layers of myself I really get to know in that process. And it makes the reemergence and the foundation that's being laid so much stronger when it happens. So in that reemergence, if you will, I put up a post on Instagram, I don't know, I think it was last week, where it was like 2026 me, and I put a picture of myself with a bunch of different things that I'm focusing on for this year. And these are things that really came up for me in my rest and reflection process in January. And I knew that these were things that I really want to have my focus be this year. These are things that I am aligned with. They're things that reflect my values. And it was things that were both really practical, like early bedtimes, slow mornings, or whatever, and then things that were very energetic or things that I want to embody. It encompassed all of those things. So I would encourage you to do this too as you are reemerging and laying the foundation of February. Define what those things are. Get really detailed with it. Be specific about what you are aligning yourself with. Who do you want to become, and how are you going to become that person? When I crafted this list, there was different things that I was thinking about or questions that I was asking myself. And also some of those things just came up very naturally. They're things that I felt really drawn to for this year. But if you're having trouble on like where to start with this, or kind of like tapping in and honing in on what those things are, here's a few suggestions of some questions that you can ask yourself and sit with them. You know, maybe write these down really quick or come back and listen to this portion of the podcast at another time. But I would encourage you to write them down in your journal. Like I think I wrote, 8 or 10 pages when I was really sitting down and getting deep about this year. And that wasn't something I did on January 1st, like I said before. It was something that I allowed to unravel and happen maybe like in the third week of the month. But here's a couple things that can prompt you to begin crafting this list. And this is not an inclusive list. There's just a few things. What am I no longer available for this year? And that's going to be different for all of us, obviously. But define what that is or write things down. Maybe there's something that immediately came up for you the second I said that question. That is a thing that you are no longer available to this year. Where am I being invited to soften? This one, it can be really heavy. And I wrote on my notes here, where can I be invited to soften in my own expectations? And maybe that's expectations for yourself or even other people. Soften in your pace. Are you rushing around all the time? Soften in your self-talk. What is the narrative going on in your head about yourself? How can that soften? And for me, someone who's very type A and independent and strong and willed and all of that, there's a lot of opportunity for me to soften in my life. And this is something that I even will remind myself of when I'm like rushing around the house during the day. I'm like, you know what? I take a breath and I'm like, let me just take a pause, a big exhale here, and soften into my day. Another thing is, how can I honor both my energy and my desires? It doesn't have to be one over the other. The two can coexist. And sometimes we feel that like our desires or dreams or goals or whatever, our energy has to be always at peak production in order for those to happen. And that's not the case. Just in the same way that we've honored the month of January as a month of rest, there are times throughout the year or other months coming up that you will need to also honor that rest. And you can honor that part of your year and still have your desires come to fruition. For women, it's like we have this monthly cycle. There are times in our cycle where we need to honor the lack of movement forward more than others. And that's so natural. And when we can do that and honor even our physical bodily cycles, there's a benefit to that for us. instead of pushing through. So just keep that in mind as you approach your year. Another thing was what's feeling energizing or expansive. And I also want to add here, not just what, but who. Are there people in your life that are really feeding into your energy or expansiveness or your abundance right now? Are there certain places? Are there certain things, certain activities, certain, routines, like whatever it is? This is usually an indication of where you are being pulled, how you should spend your time, who you should spend your time with, I've become really protective of my time. And if I am not feeling uplifted or encouraged or challenged within a certain place or even relationship, I've pulled back from that because I'm in a season right now in my life where I'm really looking to launch pad forward. And anything or any place or anyone that isn't contributing to that in a positive way, I've allowed distance to be there. And that doesn't mean it's not something that ever won't come back around, but recognize where the energy is and where the expansiveness is, and then pull yourself towards that. And on the flip side of that, where are you leaking energy? Are you overcommitted in a certain area? Are you overthinking something? Are you performing too much in a certain area? Because even when we are performing instead of flowing, there is a leak in our energy. If this podcast didn't energize me and fulfill me and uplift me, it would be something that would be leaking my energy and I wouldn't do it anymore. Obviously it doesn't, because I feel very energized and in flow when I'm sitting here and sharing and kind of when I'm speaking behind the mic. It feels very natural for me. And in that, it's like I know that this is part of my path and my calling forward, and it's an area that is energized and expansive for me. But what might be leaking the energy? That's important, because where the leaks happen, you can have a really small leak and you can have things that can feel really energized and expansive, but usually the leak is where you are going to feel what you're going to feel the most. So you could feel expanded by 90% of the things that you do, but if there is 10% a leak somewhere, that 10% of a leak is going to pollute everything. So really hone in on what might be leaking your energy. And the last thing is, where are you craving more presence? And on that 2026 board, the thing that I identified for where I can create more presence was, where can I be more creative? I want to use my hands more and be crafty and create things this year. Not create from a content or creator, influencer type of standpoint, but I literally mean like coloring. Or, I did a vision board this year and I got Mod Podge stuff and I like sealed it and it's on a board and I'm going to frame it and all this. Like, these are things that are expanding my creativity. And when you are busy expanding your creativity, there is a presence in the moment that is brought. And so I asked myself, how can I bring more presence to what I'm doing? How can I make space for that? And even in small ways. So I enjoy those crafty things, and for you, it might be something different. It might be reading. It might be walking outside. There's tons of things that can bring presence to your moment. And this is so key for everyone to do, to really disconnect from all the things. Disconnect from anything that is work. Even if something doesn't feel like work, even if you enjoy your work, we still need to disconnect from that and feel present to what we are doing. These few things that I just shared with you guys, they're not just questions, but they're also invitations on what you can bring into your year. And maybe you want to print off a picture of yourself and write out some of those things like I did, or you do it in Canva or some like creative thing online and have it as your phone screen or have it as the background of something, and let those things guide you back into alignment this month. as you re-enter with the clarity and the softness and ultimately devotion to who you are becoming, the most beautiful, vibrant version of you. And so, in closing, if January asked you to pause, February is asking you to return. Not with urgency and not with pressure, but with a deeper sense of who you are and what you are ready to carry forward. Let February be the month that you re-enter your own life, your routines, your creativity, your clarity, your own becoming. Let it unfold, one intentional step at a time. Your next chapter is waiting on your cue and not on the calendars. I'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Behind the Cusp. If you love this episode, I'd so appreciate it if you'd rate, review, or share it with someone else who's also on their path of self-growth. These all go such a long way in supporting the show. Be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find me over on Instagram @StyleCusp and follow the show Behind the Cusp. And as always, keep tuning inward. True transformation begins from the inside out.